Good morning. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. President Biden is set to give remarks at the White House on the state of the economy as the nation recovers from the pandemic. Biden is expected to tout the progress made under his administration and the American Rescue Plan, going from 60,000 to 600,000 new jobs per month. He's also expected to push for the bipartisan infrastructure deal and the larger American Families Plan. We'll bring that to you live when it happens. And a Florida man who stormed the Capitol and entered the Senate chamber on January 6th is being sentenced today. Paul Hodgkins will be the first rioter sentenced on a felony charge after he pleaded guilty to one count of obstructing a congressional proceeding. He is not accused of taking part in any violence or destroying property while in the building, but prosecutors noted he brought rope, goggles, and latex gloves with him, saying that showed he was prepared for violence. Prosecutors are asking for a sentence of 18 months. The sentencing is likely to be watched by hundreds of others arrested on similar charges, as it could set a benchmark for others considering plea deals. Dozens more rioters are in plea negotiations for their roles in the assault on the Capitol. So far, about 500 have been arrested for participating in the riot. But we begin with frontline workers around the country sounding the alarm about the COVID Delta variant. Nearly every state in the country except South Dakota and Wyoming is reporting an increase in new COVID cases. The average number of cases in the U.S. is up 158% in the last 4 weeks, with hospitalizations up nearly 40%. Senior national correspondent Steve Osinsami has the latest.
Healthcare workers in the nation's hospitals are concerned this morning by the new numbers of COVID cases they're seeing again, most likely caused by the Delta variant of the coronavirus. In Oklahoma, the average number of hospital admissions for COVID-19 has nearly tripled in the last month.
We're basically full now. We hadn't seen that since the height of the pandemic in January and February.
Every state but South Dakota and Wyoming is reporting a rise in new cases. Nearly 19,000 people are currently hospitalized nationwide, about 26% more this week than last week. That's still, of course, much better than the all-time high of 125,000 COVID-19 hospitalizations that the country reached in January. But authorities worry that the numbers are moving in the wrong direction. George spoke to Dr. Ashish Jha earlier this morning.
The evidence is getting more clear by the day. If you're not vaccinated, you've got a very good chance of getting the Delta variant and getting very sick.
That's right. The evidence is that this virus is going to be with us for a long time. It's going to become endemic. So everybody is either going to end up at some point getting vaccinated or they're going to end up getting infected. People really have to be very careful out there if you're unvaccinated. And the best way to protect yourself is to get the shot.
Authorities here at the CDC say that most of the outbreaks are happening in states with low vaccination rates, but they do say there is one bright spot, that in these same states where the word has gotten out about these new infections and new hospitalizations, they're seeing a slight increase in the number of people who are newly vaccinated. Diane?
All right, we'll take the bright spots where we can find them. Steve Osinsami in Atlanta, thank you. And let's bring in Stanford Health physician Dr. Alok Patel for more on this. Dr. Patel, thanks for being here. You know, for now, only kids 12 and over can get vaccinated, and many parents are hesitant to vaccinate their kids at all. So how vulnerable are kids and teens to the Delta variant?
Well, good morning, Diane. You know, teens right now are still as susceptible as they always have been throughout the pandemic. The one thing that's more concerning, as everyone knows, is that the Delta variant is way more contagious. Now, we don't necessarily know that it's more lethal per se, but if you have more children who are exposed right now, you're going to inevitably get more severe illness. And, you know, it breaks my heart when I see these intubated children in the ICU in Mississippi who are not eligible to get vaccinated, but are at risk because of the adults around them who are not getting themselves protected. And, you know, even right now in the Bay Area, I've seen and heard of stories of teens getting COVID-19 and getting symptomatic illnesses when it's totally preventable. So kids, teens, adolescents are absolutely vulnerable, not only for that severe illness, but also for long hauler symptoms in the future. We've got to keep them protected.
Now, some schools are set to bring students back as soon as this week. And now the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending everyone wear a mask in school this fall because so many kids won't be protected. So what do you think? Is that necessary?
You know, it's really hard to kind of make national guidance about masks and have all these little stipulations about your local state and vaccination rate. But I do want people to look at the new guidance and look at it from an optimistic angle and realize the American Academy of Pediatrics and public health officials are doing everything they can in terms of this layered protection recommendation to prioritize getting kids back in-person learning. And you know what? If we don't want kids being masked, then we have to look at our own communities and say, Well, what are we doing to keep them protected? And that's vaccines. And so, we have a special eye on all the schools in southeastern United States who don't have high levels of vaccination. When they reopen schools, there is a huge potential for local outbreaks to happen. So I stand by all the things that we can do to keep kids protected, to ensure that they're back in classrooms where we know that's the best way for them to learn. And that's the best way to kind of get rid of the disparity in education we've seen over the past year.
The Prime Minister of Israel says data there shows the Pfizer vaccine is giving, quote, significantly less protection against infection from the Delta variant. So what does the data show at this point about the effectiveness of vaccines against the Delta variant? And what do you make of that?
Diane, this one's tough because, there's studies coming from all over the world now pouring about the effectiveness of the vaccine. Now, Israel has a smaller study that people are citing, showed about a 64% protection rate. But if you combine studies from all over the world, both Pfizer and Moderna are above that 80-ish, 90% effective against the Delta variant after getting the full series. Even early data shows that Johnson & Johnson here in the United States is above 60% protective. Now, yes, some people might say, oh, that's not 90%. But guess what? If we have enough people protected by getting fully vaccinated, that 60 to 70% is still pretty solid. And that's why we are seeing that 99.5% of severe illnesses right now, hospitalizations, are all in the unvaccinated, because the vaccines still absolutely work against the Delta variant.
So this 80, 90, 60% that you're talking about with Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, this is against infection at all, not just serious infection and hospitalization?
This is correct. This is against infection at all, symptomatic illness. Now, remember, the numbers are still moving around, but the question isn't necessarily if the vaccines work against the variant. The question is more about the durability and how long the protection lasts. So is there a difference between someone who was vaccinated by Moderna or Pfizer in December versus someone who may have gotten it over summer? And that's where we need to see more data. And that's where the whole debate about the booster shot is really coming into play.
Got it. Now, England is ending nearly all of its COVID restrictions today. Cases there are rising, but hospitalizations are staying low. So what does that tell you?
It's almost like what we saw here in the United States. From what I've seen, there's about a 65% of people living in England are fully vaccinated. They're about to have Freedom Day, which we've had Freedom Day in sporadic times throughout this country. Some Freedom Days started way earlier this year, whereas in the Bay Area, it was in June and so forth. And what I'm worried about in England is the same thing that we see here, our local outbreaks. Like I see right now on screen, there's a packed nightclub. I'm worried that the people there who are unvaccinated in England are still going to be susceptible to the Delta variant. And we may see these pockets of outbreaks all throughout the country. And then what's worrisome is those people could inevitably get on planes and you could start to see more of these outbreaks. But same rule as always, those who are vaccinated are going to be protected. So we're likely going to avoid those massive national surges. And
at least 3 people staying in the Olympic Village have now tested positive for COVID. How concerned are you that the Olympics could lead to a surge in cases? The Olympics are going to be a very interesting litmus test for our level of protection. But you have 70,000 people coming from around the world. Those are athletes, trainers, people associated with the Olympics. And so, it is concerning that people, athletes or anyone who are unvaccinated are going to get sick. And it would be devastating to see someone train all this time and not be able to go and compete. But at the same time, Japan does not have a very high vaccination rate. There seems to be a divide in Japan, a huge divide about who wants the games versus who is not. So I think some of the cultural significance are going to be missing from this Olympics. I'm hoping that they're doing everything, not just promoting vaccinations, but also promoting all the other mitigation strategies to keep the athletes safe. All right, Dr. Alok Patel, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
And this morning, we're learning a member of the U.S. women's gymnastics team has tested positive for COVID-19. This comes after U.S. tennis star Coco Gauff pulled out of the Olympic Games after she tested positive. So for more on COVID's impact on the Olympics, let's go back to Kamo in Tokyo. Kenneth Moten waving at me in the graphic. I love it. Kenneth, what do we know? Your hand's a little bigger in real life than it is in the graphic, Kenneth. What do we know about this latest positive case from the U.S. national team? Because they're playing it a little close to the vest.
They are. They haven't released many details. They haven't released her identity. But we do know as a teenager, she was an alternate on the women's artistic gymnastics team. We do know that she was training with the team ahead of competition this weekend in a town outside of Tokyo. And then that's actually what we're seeing, some athletes who are actually based outside of this major city, outside of the capital city, and then they're coming in closer to their competition. We do know that another athlete that she came in close contact with is also in isolation and quarantine as well. And again, that shows the ripple effect that can happen, Diane, when it comes to a positive case. And so far, we know with this case, some positive cases in the Olympic Village, and also recently an IOC official from South Korea who was fully vaccinated testing positive. That makes about 60 cases of people connected to these games who have tested positive since July 1st.
Oh, and it's hard to think about these athletes training for years for this, and then to get all the way there and not be able to compete. Kenneth, Toyota's Japan's biggest car maker. Now that company's saying that it's not going to air commercials in Japan related to the Olympics, and none of its executives plan to attend the opening ceremonies. Why the backlash?
Well, we know, unfortunately, there are a good portion of people here in Japan. The Japanese people just do not want these Olympic Games. There's been a recent surge in cases. I think they reached more than 1,000 daily new cases last week for several days in a row. You're in a state of emergency. You've got coronavirus surging in this country. And as Dr. Alok Patel just mentioned to you, Diane, the vaccination rate is pretty low. We've got 20% vaccination rate for those for both doses. 35%, just slightly higher for those who've had at least one dose of the vaccine. And so those numbers could be higher. The Japanese people know that. And we talked to some Japanese people on the street in areas that we could be in today. We're in this 14-day media bubble quarantine still, where we can have to stay inside our private transport, but we can get out in certain areas. And there were some Japanese people there. And so I asked them, you know, what concerns do you have? And obviously the surge, using the resources, the medical resources, the hospital, the facilities here, and having, you know, tens of thousands of people, including 11,000 athletes in this country, you know, all over this next 2-week period, they feel like it will strain the system, and that the Olympics, the IOC, they're just not prepared to handle this influx here in Japan. And so you've got Toyota pulling out with those commercials. That is a big blow, and it also highlights the impact on the bottom line of these games. $15 billion to $26 billion went into these games, even after the delay, pushing it back 1 year, Diane. And so it really shows that the bottom line will be impacted for these games, and Japan will not reap the benefits, will not get that major economic boost that it was hoping for from these games.
Yeah, you have to feel for the Japanese people. The host country always spends a ton of money to put these games on, and they do so with the expectation that when they happen, the country's going to get a lot of attention. All of these tourists are going to come in. They're going to fill hotel rooms and restaurants, and they're going to make so much money, or all of that money back in tourism. And of course, this year, that's just not going to happen for Japan. So you really have to feel for the Japanese people on all of those fronts, Kenneth. And then over the weekend, the president of the International Olympic Committee talked about plans to help athletes connect with their friends and family virtually since they can't be there in person. What's the latest on that?
We know these athletes feed off family, friends, fans in the stands watching them. They're not going to get this. No spectators allowed. Family and friends are not allowed here. No foreign visitors are allowed in Tokyo. And again, no local spectators will be allowed in those venues as well. And so they're going to pump sounds. They're going to have immersive sounds, they call it, being pumped out of speakers from previous games at those venues, similar to what the NBA, NFL, soccer, what we saw in the States and around the globe. What they did for all of those athletes at those games that we've seen over the past year when fans were not allowed in the stands. They're going to do something very similar to that. They're also going to have, Diane, what they call live geo maps of fans cheering athletes on, selfie videos from fans, and Zoom calls for athletes with their family and friends directly after the competition. And we know that the most decorated gymnast ever, Simone Biles, told us right before she took off for Tokyo that that was going to be the toughest part, not having her family there. They've always been there to watch her compete. And so having that type of immersive sound being pumped in, having the Zoom calls, hopefully that will help our Simone Biles.
Yeah, and all the other athletes that I'm sure are missing their friends and family right now. K-Mo in Tokyo, always great to talk to you, my friend. We miss you, but we like having you here on camera at least.
Diane, I hope you like my summer body in that graphic there, in that animation.
Very slim, Kenneth. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Kenneth. All right, coming up, Britney Spears is calling out her father and her sister in a scathing new Instagram post. See what the singer's saying now and what she says it will take for her to get on stage again. Welcome back. Britney Spears is calling out her father and sister on social media, referring to them as her so-called support system, adding that her conservatorship has killed her dreams. This as the Free Britney movement has taken on a whole new level with legislation that will be introduced to Congress. Kaylee Hartung is in Los Angeles with the latest.
This morning, Britney Spears' conservatorship battle inspiring new legislation on Capitol Hill. The Free Britney Act, set to be introduced to Congress on Tuesday by Representatives Nancy Mace and Charlie Crist, allowing a person under conservatorship like Britney to petition the court for an independent conservator who's not a family member or related in any way, aiming to protect the conservatee from bad actors who could try to profit from the legal arrangement. This is Britney's conservator of person, Jody Montgomery, returns to court today to discuss her petition to hire 24/7 security to protect her from the death threat she says she's received. She's requesting Britney's estate pay the more than $50,000 per month expense. But Britney's father, Jamie, who's in charge of her estimated $60 million fortune, has told the court he does not believe such an expense is reasonable, necessary, or a proper expense. Over the weekend, Britney declaring on social media the conservatorship she's been under for more than a decade killed my dreams. And revealing how she feels about her sister Jamie Lynn recreating her music in 2017, alongside other Radio Disney stars in tribute to Britney. Writing, "I don't like that my sister showed up at an award show and performed my songs to remixes. My so-called support system hurt me deeply." And in another post, Britney calling out the people closest to her, writing, "How dare you make it public that now you care? Did you put your hand out when I was drowning? Again, no." Hours later, Jamie Lynn posting that she is feeling solid, stable, and still. So, Diane, now Britney has essentially put her whole family on blast. And she says so long as she's under conservatorship, Instagram will be the only stage we see her on because she doesn't want her dad handling what she wears, says, does, or thinks. Diane?
All right, Kaylee Hartung in Los Angeles, thank you. And let's bring in SiriusXM radio host and ABC News contributor Mike Muse for more on this. Mike, thanks for being here. You've been covering Britney for years now. Her sister has already taken some heat online lately, but how surprised are you to now hear Britney herself calling out her sister as her so-called support system, and how is this impacting the family?
Hey, Diane, good to see you. I'm not too surprised at all. I think what was very poignant in Britney's testimony is she said the reason why she held back for so long is because she didn't feel like people would believe her. People didn't believe the type of circumstance and situation that she was in, or that her family could be bad actors, if you will. And what we're seeing now is that Britney now realizes that she's receiving a broad spectrum of support for the Free Britney movement. And she's now recognizing that people are very empathetic to her cause and want to see some type of change happen. As a result, when you feel supported like that, you feel a little bit more free to begin to speak your truth now that, as she said in her testimony, people wouldn't think that she's crazy.
Now, Britney also wrote that as long as her father's in charge of the conservatorship, she will not be performing anytime soon. Now, her manager recently stepped down, saying that Britney planned to retire. So does that contradict that? Can fans hope that maybe they will see Britney back on stage at some point if this conservatorship case is resolved?
That's a really great question that you asked, Diane. I think it's a game of chess that Britney is doing right now. She's saying that she will not perform while her father is in the conservatorship, so therefore, why would she need a manager? Her manager is probably stepping down. It's possibly part of a strategy from Britney Spears to say, I mean what I say that I'm not performing as long as you are my conservator, so then why should I have a manager? I don't think that it means that she will retire. I think that she doesn't plan to work anytime soon in order to have to pay the bills and a salary of a family and of teams to which she does not want around her. And so I think what she's saying is this is more of a protest that I refuse to perform anytime soon, so therefore I don't need a manager. But I bet, Diane, once this is all said and done, if the courts decide to relinquish Britney Spears from a conservatorship, I'm almost assured Britney will perform in some type of way, in some type of capacity. I just don't think she's just going to walk away from the stage and or from other opportunities, because at the end of the day, Diane, she's a creator. She's been creating since a very young age when she was a Disney star.
Now, the Free Britney movement is inspiring legislation set to be introduced to Congress. It's hard to think when this movement started of where it's ended up. So what do you think is the larger impact of all of this?
You know, Diane, I hate to be the guy to say this, but, you know, you and I said it right here on your show about a month ago. I said that Congress needs to do more to actually look at not just about Britney Spears, Diane, but about all those who can't speak up for themselves. And I think Congress is watching us, because not only do you see Representative Kristen Macy introducing legislation from a bipartisan perspective, but more so, Diane, you've seen Senator Warren and Casey also too go forward and send letters to the DHS Secretary, Secretary Becerra, as well as to Eric Garland, Attorney General, to look at more data surrounding individuals who may also be suffering in silence, who may not have a voice for themselves. And Diane, for me, this is what it's been all about. Yes, Britney Spears is a conversation. She draws the headlines. But in part, I'm thankful for that, because now it will open up for those who can't speak for themselves, who may not be taken seriously, who doesn't have a net worth value of $60 million to be able to fight this and bring this forward. My concern has always been to those who've been locked into these unfair, inhumane situations where no one will actually believe them. So I'm actually glad Congress is stepping in. This is when you can say democracy is working for the good of the people, which is always it should be, but we haven't seen that as of lately. But now you're starting to see that this is what democracy is for. This is what Congress is for, to fight for those who are unable to fight for themselves. And so for that, Diane, I'm happy that the Free Britney Spears movement is in play, because hopefully other people can become free. And if not, put other guardrails in place to ensure that there's more oversight for those who are in this conservatorship. And interesting, Diane, as I close, it's interesting to note that Secretary Becerra was formerly the Attorney General of California, to which Britney Spears' conservatorship is there for. So I think there's going to be some interesting stories to come out of that pretty soon.
All right, there sure are, and we know you'll be watching them. Mike Muse, thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, ready for liftoff. We're talking to Amazon founder Jeff Bezos ahead of his history-making space flight tomorrow morning. Hear how he's preparing and why this flight is something he's been dreaming about since he was just 5. Stay with us. Welcome back. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is ready for liftoff as he prepares to make history tomorrow on Blue Origin's first passenger flight to space. The flight will send passengers 62 miles above Earth, and ahead of tomorrow's flight, our Michael Strahan sat down with Jeff Bezos and the rest of the crew of that Blue Origin ship. Take a listen.
Jeff, I want to start with you. This has been something you've been dreaming of since you were 5 years old when you saw the moon landing. So what is it like now to know that this dream is finally coming true?
Well, Michael, it's so exciting. You know, tomorrow morning, this crew is going to go to space, and I have just been dreaming about this really my whole life, but I don't know what it's going to mean for me. You know, I don't know. I'm very curious about what tomorrow's actually going to bring. Everybody who's been to space says it changes them in some way, and I'm just really excited to figure out how it's going to change me. People say they see the thin limb of the Earth's atmosphere. It teaches them how fragile and precious the planet is, how there are no boundaries. I don't know what it's going to do, but I'm excited to find out.
And we're excited to hear what you have to say about it once you come back. And we know this is the first human flight for Blue Origin. The capsule, it's entirely automated, no test pilots. So does it make you a little nervous?
I'm not nervous. You know, we've had 15 successful flights, and I'm excited, but I'm not nervous.
And we say you don't have an automated pilot, but you do have a trained astronaut on board. Wally, you trained to go to space in the 60s with the Mercury 13 space program, but the women's program was canceled. So what does it mean for you to be given this opportunity 60 years later?
Well, I had a lot of training in those weeks before, or in 1960, not only in America, but I went to Russia and I trained with the cosmonauts. And not until about 2 or 3 weeks after my training did I was told that I did better than the men. But I was only 20 years old then, and I could do anything that I wanted to do.
By the way, yeah, we've been training with Wally here in West Texas, and I can tell you she's still doing better than the men.
Oh,
she can outrun all of us. She's 82 years old, and she can outrun all of us.
I would go with Wally any day of the week. I mean, I'm excited and pumped up for that. And Oliver, you are Blue Origin's first paying customer, but more than that, you're 18 years old. So what is it like knowing that you'll become the youngest person ever in space, and what are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, I don't think I've realized yet like how special it is to become the youngest person ever, and it's such an opportunity for me to do that, and also to be an example for other kids like that it is able now, and Blue Origin has made the opportunity there for more and more people to go, and it's so amazing for me to go, and I still can't believe it. No.
Well, at 18, I was still trying to figure out how to tie. I was trying to figure out how to tie my shoes at 18. So you're going to space, my friend. And Mark, big question for you. What was it like when your brother came to you and said, "I want you to go to space with me"? Did you think that was a wild idea, or was this a dream that you both shared?
Well, Jeff and I have gone on a lot of adventures together, and he's my best friend. And when he came to me and said, let's go on this one, I was just over the moon, so to speak. It was remarkable. So excited to be there to support him, to represent my mom and dad and our sister Christina in supporting him and watching this lifelong dream come true. It's just an absolute thrill, Michael.
Oh, no doubt.
Mark has been a part of the Blue Origin program from the very beginning. He's been a huge contributor all along, and he's actually been a huge contributor in my whole life. He's my best friend. I couldn't have a better person to go to space with.
I tell you what, I love hearing that, and hearing that you have the support of your family, of course, and your brother there. Mark is going with you. And Jeff, I know you guys are all scheduled for liftoff in about 25 hours. Tomorrow is the 52nd anniversary of the moon landing. So can you put into context for us what this signals for the future of space exploration and travel?
Well, what we're hoping to do is to build the road to space so that future generations, maybe Oliver, he's an 18-year-old young guy, and maybe Oliver and people of his generation will be able to do amazing things in space if we have practice and get good at reusable vehicles. So the big thing that Blue Origin is doing is making these vehicles reusable and in an operable way so they can be flown over and over and over, more like commercial airliners. If we can get to that stage, then the things that the next generations will figure out what to do in space, how to benefit Earth with all those things they can do in space, that'll be amazing to see. So that's the real goal.
Our thanks to the Blue Origin crew and Michael Strahan for that interview. And you can watch full coverage of the Blue Origin launch tomorrow morning right here on ABC News Live. And that does it for this newscast. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern for the breakdown. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of the day.
This is why you've been chosen.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.